Okay, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zone you're in the world, I don't know. I just woke up a little while ago, but it's different for everybody. The point is, though, that we're less than a month away from the 1,000-year Blood War arc of Bleach. It took a long time to get to this point, but we're almost there. We're in the home stretch. We can make it. All right. So I thought it would be appropriate to make this video. I think this would be a really interesting idea to sort of recap the last few moments of the Bleach anime, like where we left off. To clarify, this is not a video recapping all of Bleach. So if you've never watched or read Bleach before, and you're like, hey, do I have to watch all of the first series of Bleach in order to watch the final arc of Bleach? Yes. Yes, you do, and this is not the video to help you, but that's okay, because there's a lot of other YouTubers right now that are reviewing, like, the entire story. I know Totally Not Mark is going through all of the different, seasons of Bleach, all the different story arcs. Volume 1 podcast, I've been on there a few times. They went through the whole story, so there's plenty of different, like, podcasts and YouTubers and everything that you can go check out to recap the entirety of the whole story of Bleach, okay? But this video is not for that. This video, on the other hand, is specifically for the people that watched Bleach back in the day but haven't really kept up with it like in the manga ever since the anime finished. So maybe you watched Bleach way back when it was on Adult Swim back in like 2007, 2008, and you were like, wow, this is a pretty good anime, you know, Ichigo's got a giant sword, that's pretty sweet, you know, and maybe you watched to the end of the anime, but it's like, it's been 10 years now. I mean, the Bleach anime ended, I think, in March of 2012, and in the English dub, I think it wrapped up in the fall of 2014. So it's been 8 to 10 years since maybe you've watched it and you haven't went back and recapped it or anything, and you haven't read the final arc in the manga. Maybe you're not into reading the manga, and that's fine. So this video is for you to sort of like refresh your memory. We're going to go over the major story beats, like where the story is at right now, where the characters are at right now, which abilities they have, and where they're at in like their character development. What are the last major things to happen to these characters leading into the final arc? I will not be spoiling anything about the 1,000-year Blood War arc other than the name, because that's already been advertised. It's going to involve some kind of war, and the war might be over blood, and the war might last 1,000 years. 1,000 years of Bleach, everybody! 1,000 years of Bleach! I don't know. So there's not going to be any other than like very, 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 very basic stuff like that's already been advertised in the like trailers and stuff for the new anime. I'm not going to be spoiling anything that's going to happen in the 1,000-year Blood War arc. We're just going to be covering everything where we left off and how you can sort of connect the dots on where we're at right now going into the first episode, which is airing October 10th, okay? So I guess the first thing to bring up is the last episode of Bleach, which aired in March of 2012, was episode 366, titled Changing History, Unchanging Heart. And that was the episode that concluded the Fullbring Arc, or the Lost Agent arc. The chapter where it ended on, if you want to pick up with the manga, was chapter 479. So that was the last chapter that was in the anime, and so the 1,000-year Blood War arc will begin with chapter 480, if you want to go pick up the manga there. This is volume 54, so this is the last volume of the Fullbring Arc, so everything from volume 55 onward is the 1,000-year Blood War arc, if you just wanted some reference there. So, before we talk about the Fullbring Arc, I feel like the last big, major, bombastic event in Bleach that probably a lot of people remember is the defeat of Aizen. Okay, so the conclusion of the fake Karakura Town arc, this big, epic war that spanned many, many years, that started, you know, the big climactic finale of the Soul Society arc, with Aizen revealing himself as the main antagonist of the story, and he ascends into Hueco Mundo, and he creates the Arrancar. Ichigo goes back to the world of the living, he meets the Visors, he gets hollow powers, they barge into Hueco Mundo to rescue Orihime, who had been kidnapped by Ukiura. Ichigo has to fight his way through all of the Arrancars. He fights against Grimmjow, he wins. He fights against Noitra, he loses, but then Kenpachi shows up, the rest of the, you know, Shinigami, Byakuya, Unohana, Mayuri, they all show up, they fight the Espada. Ichigo eventually fights Ukiura, he goes into his badass Vasto Lorde hollow form, defeats Ukiura, and then some other stuff happens at Hueco Mundo, and then we cut over to fake Karakura, Karakura, where the Espada, like the top 3 Espada, are fighting the captains. Toshiro fights against Haribel. Soifone fights against Baragon Luisenbarm, Espada number 2, the former king of Huecomundo. Stark, the number 1 Espada, fights against Shunsui. Then the Vizards show up there, and it basically all culminates down to Ichigo in a one-on-one brawl with Aizen, who has now absorbed the Hogyoku, has achieved amazing powers, goes through a bunch of different evolutions, turns into a butterfly very briefly, and then whatever the hell this thing is. And then Ichigo finally defeats him using the hidden secret ability of his Zanpakuto, Zangetsu. He utilizes the final Getsuga Tensho, which turns him into the single most badass form he's ever had in the entire story. And then he uses the technique Mugetsu, or Moonless Night, or, that brings down this giant veil of darkness, slices Aizen right in half. That does not kill him. He basically patches himself back up, but he's weakened to the point that Uehara arrives. Uehara seals him, and then he is imprisoned in the lowest prison of the Soul Society, Muken, okay, or like nothingness, okay? So that might be, that was a very, very abridged, recap of the Fake Karakura Town arc, but I feel like that's probably the last big event that a lot of people remember from Bleach, like if you were watching Bleach back in the day. So with that being said, let me just bring up Aizen here really quick and where he's at right now when the 1,000-Year Blood War arc begins, because he was the main antagonist in Bleach for so long. Many people might be like, yeah, I remember Bleach, I remember Aizen. What's he doing? Where's he at right now? He's still in prison. He's still imprisoned. We haven't really talked about him at all since he was imprisoned. He was, before the Central 46, he was in this chair and he was bound with all of these, like, bindings, these black bandages or whatever. And even right before he was sentenced, he was sort of, like, mouthing off to the Central 46, like the highest authority in the Soul Society. They initially were going to sentence him to 18,800 years, I believe, but then he mouthed off. He had to have one last quip. And so they were like, bind his eye, bind his mouth, and seal him for 20,000 years. Now, I will bring up, many of you might wonder why bother, sealing him for 20,000 years or whatever. Like, shouldn't you just seal him forever or something? Keep in mind that Shinigami live a very, very long time. And it was also mentioned by the Central 46 that Aizen was essentially immortal. Because Aizen, that was part of the reason why Aizen was being so sarcastic and was giving attitude to the Central 46. And the Central 46 were basically like, oh, don't think that you're above the law just because you're immortal or we can't kill you. So it's very clear that they've tried to do this, they can't, okay? So Aizen is imprisoned in Muken, the lowest prison in the Soul Society, the worst absolute place. It's like level 6 in One Piece of Impel Down. It's like the worst place that you could possibly be imprisoned. And so he's bound up, and we don't really know anything else that's happening with him at the beginning of this arc, okay? So I just want to bring up Aizen first, because I feel like he's the first person a lot of people were going to mention, okay? But now going into the Fullbringer arc, which was the arc right before the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, this arc was in many ways a reset of the story, kind of going back to Kubo's roots at the beginning. So at the end of the Fake Karakura Town arc, in order to defeat Aizen, Ichigo uses Final Getsuga, which also removes him of all of his Shinigami powers, okay? All of his abilities are gone. He loses his Shinigami powers. He also loses his Hollow powers. He even loses the ability to see spirits like he had at the beginning. So he's pretty much just a normal human at the beginning of the Lost Agent or the Fullbringer arc. There is a little bit of a time skip in between Fake Karakura and the Fullbringer arc. It's about 17 months, so about a year and a half. Ichigo and his friends, Orihime, Uryu, and Chad, are all now third-year high school students, so they're about, to leave to go to college and graduate. That's actually a big point at the beginning of the Fullbringer arc. Ichigo and Keigo and Mizuriro, all of his friends are sitting around basically talking about, like, what do you want to do after high school? Are you going to go to college? What's going to happen? Orihime is working at a bakery. Ichigo has a part-time job at the well. He works for a lady named Ikumi Unagi. Her name, literally Unagi, just translates to eel in Japanese. And she runs like an odd job business that Ichigo is like her only employee. So it's like, Ichigo, go bring this package over to this person. Or Ichigo, go, walk this person's dog. Just like odd jobs and stuff. That's what Ichigo does for a living. And so after the events of Fake Karakura, though, now that Ichigo no longer has his Shinigami powers, his friends sort of have to pick up the pace and be like, okay, we're going to continue to get stronger to protect Karakura Town because Ichigo no longer can. And so you get the impression that Ichigo, like, part of him kind of likes settling back into like a normal life as a high school student, but also he laments his own powerlessness because he can no longer even see spirits or hollows. So if there ever was an attack, he couldn't really do anything about it. Rukia, at this point, there was the tearful goodbye between Ichigo and Rukia at the end of the fake Karakura Town arc, like right before he lost his Shinigami powers for good. He was able to look at Rukia right before she disappeared, you know. This was expanded a lot more in the anime. Probably one of the best filler episodes in the entire Bleach anime. It was the episode just called Thank You, where Ichigo and Rukia just kind of spend the day together, and then eventually he loses his powers and she just disappears. Even though there were ways for Rukia to go back to Karakura Town and see Ichigo, like she could always turn into, like she could, you know, inhabit a Gigai, because a Gigai is a false body that can be seen by everybody. So she could have easily went back to the Soul Society, got into a Gigai, came back to see Ichigo, but she hasn't done that at all. So Ichigo has had no contact with Rukia for 17 months, all right? So he's sort of settling back into normalcy, but every once in a while he's reminded of his own powerlessness. So the major events of the Fullbring Arc kind of take off when at one point Uryu is attacked by an unseen assailant, and so he gets sent to the hospital. At the same time, Ichigo is confronted by a man named Ginjo, who states that he is a member of this organization called Execution, and he knows a lot of stuff about Ichigo. He knows his true identity. He used to be a deputy Shinigami. He knows about his father, Isshin Kurosaki, who is also a Shinigami, and so he's like, hey, I want you to come back to, you know, our headquarters, so to speak, our hideout, and I want to talk to you about some things. And so Ichigo at first says no, like, I'm not going to go with this complete stranger off to this random location. But then after Uryu gets attacked, and there's some other stuff added in the anime where his friends are attacked by this strange individual wearing suspenders, so you know he's evil. Ichigo finally relents at that point. Also, he's not really getting, he just feels distant from everybody at this point, and that's a major running theme throughout the entirety of the Fullbring Arc. It gets worse as it goes on, but it's the idea that Ichigo is feeling alone, and that his friends are also remaining distant from him a little bit because they don't want him to get in danger because he cannot fight. But also, like, he's not really getting a straight message out of his dad or Uehara. Uehara Kisuke, he's still living in Karakura Town, although after the events of fake Karakura, he's sort of been pardoned. The same thing with the Vizards. We'll get to them in a moment. I'm going to go through, like, the individual groups. Just wanted to cover, like, Ichigo and the main, you know, story of the Fullbringer arc first. So, Ichigo eventually relents, and he calls the number on the execution hotline, basically. He goes and meets Ginjo. Ginjo explains to him a whole new power system that had previously not really been explored in Bleach, and that is the power of Fullbring. Okay, the ability to basically, the idea is that everything in the world, everything in existence has a soul. Everything, not just living things like plants and animals and, you know, humans and stuff, but also, like, bricks have souls, this desk has a soul, my computer has a soul, this microphone, this notepad, this replica of Benihime, everything has a soul, okay? And Fullbring is the ability to draw out that soul and kind of modify it, bend it to your will to help you out in various ways. Like, for example, you can Fullbring the asphalt in order to make it more elastic to increase your jumping speed, or something of that nature. You can also bend the air so you can jump on the air, kind of like the Shinigami do, okay? So Ginjo explains this concept to him. He's part of this organization where a bunch of Fullbringers are part of, and they explain that their goal to Ichigo is like, hey, we don't want our powers. We want to be, you know, rid of them. So in order to do that, we need a Shinigami. However, you no longer have your powers. So as Execution, as this organization, we will help you get your powers back if in exchange you help us get rid of this cursed ability, because Ginjo explains that how you become a Fullbringer is that your mother, while you were, like, you know, in her womb as, like, your pregnant mother, was attacked by a hollow, and so the residual power of the hollow is inside of the mother, and that, like, taints the baby's soul a little bit, and then that's how you become a Fullbringer, okay? And so they're kind of like, they hate these abilities. They want Ichigo to get his powers back so he can, like, remove them from them, okay? That's the idea, okay? That's revealed later to be a complete lie. It's revealed, and I'm giving you just a beat-for-beat kind of abridged version of the Fullbringer arc here, but it's revealed that the man wearing the suspenders, his name is actually Tsukishima, and his Fullbring is the ability to actually manipulate memories, which is a very devastating ability. So there was this master plan involved where Tsukishima was part of Execution. He modified the memories of everybody in the group except for himself so that they think they're working against him, and, like, Tsukishima's the main enemy. He sort of comes off as like a diet, caffeine-free version of Aizen at the beginning of the arc. So Ichigo begins training for Fullbring, though, and this Fullbring goes through a variety of different versions. There's one version that focuses on his combat pass, and he kind of uses it as like a shuriken, and then there's a version where he's clad in a aura that looks very similar to his Shihakusho as being a Shinigami, and then we finally have his final form of the Fullbring, which kind of looks like sort of like a Super Sentai kind of character. He has like this white armor and this cool like trench knife, and it's a very hand-to-hand combat, very, very fast, very strong sort of attack sort of based clad Fullbring, okay? So eventually, though, Tsukishima goes around and manipulates the memories of Orihime and Chad, as well as Yuzu and Karin, Mizuriro, Keigo, Tatsuki, all of Ichigo's friends. And Ichigo feels even more distant now because his friends like are literally viewing Ichigo as the crazy one. Ichigo is the weird one. He's like, what do you mean, Ichigo Tsukishima? He's always been with us ever since the very beginning. This culminates in the finale of the arc where Ichigo goes back to the mansion, which is like Tsukishima's home, where the major confrontation occurs here. Ginjo seems to be Ichigo's only ally until it's revealed that his memories were wiped as well, and so it's revealed that Ginjo was actually the main mastermind. Well, Ginjo and Tsukishima working together were the main masterminds of this whole plan. All the members of Execution were also in on it. They had their memories modified as well, and so now we have a situation where it's Ichigo pretty much against all of his friends. He fights against Orihime and Chad very briefly. We find out, by the way, Chad also has a Fullbring. As for Orihime, we're not sure if what her ability is, the Shun Shun Rika, if that was a Fullbring. I always assumed that it was. It was never directly stated that it was. We know for a fact that Chad has a Fullbring, but considering Orihime had a very similar kind of ability, and she was attacked by a Hollow at one point as well, I like to think that it is a Fullbring. It's just never been confirmed, okay? So, at probably the worst point for Ichigo, maybe in the entire story, where he's at his absolute lowest at this point, he has his Fullbring removed by Ginjo. Ginjo is revealed to be the first substitute Shinigami before Ichigo. Okay, he was the first one. We don't really know a lot about his backstory. This is something that's more explored in the Bleach light novels, Can't Fear Your Own World, so I would recommend you go check those out. Those have an official English release as well, if you want to learn more about that. But in the context of the anime, in the context of the actual Fullbringer arc in the canon of the story, we don't find out much about Ginjo's backstory other than he was a substitute Shinigami at one point. So he's still human. Keep that in mind. He's still a human. He just has Shinigami powers, same as Ichigo, okay? And so he lost those powers at one point, and now the whole reason why they manipulated Ichigo is in order to get his Fullbring to get Ginjo's power back. So Ginjo absorbs Ichigo's Fullbring, the power he works so hard just to have an ability where he can fight again. He loses it all over again, right? And he basically just begins to cry because he's like, oh my god, I lost everything, and also all my friends as well. Like, you know, his entire world is essentially collapsing around him. In typical Kubo fashion, the rain begins to fall around him, and he's like, I don't even know what's going on anymore, man. Why am I even here? And then right when Ichigo's at his lowest and bawling his eyes out like a toddler, boom! Rukia shows back up and stabs him in the back with a sword. Oh, I should probably explain that was a good thing. No. It wasn't like, it was a magical Ryatsu sword that when stabbed with it, Ichigo gets his Shinigami powers back. Probably should have explained that. So Ichigo gets stabbed by Rukia. She's back. It's incredible. And then he gets his Shinigami powers back in full, plus a little bit extra because of all the Fullbring training he did, which sort of increased his physical stats. So his new Shikai looks a little bit modified. His sword looks a little bit more different. It looks a little bit more curved like his Fullbring trench knife did, just a lot bigger. The cord that he uses to keep, you know, his sword on his back, that looks a little bit different there. And he's got these really cool tattoos now when he goes into his Shinigami form that are in reference to his Fullbring, okay? And so he gets his Shinigami powers back. However, Ginjo gets his back at the same time. At this point, he also shares a little bit of Ichigo's power with all the members of Execution, so they power up as well. And so it becomes like an all-out battle. But it's okay, because on top of Rukia showing up, some other familiar faces from the Soul Society show up as well. Byakuya is back, Renji's there, Kenpachi is there, Yachiru is there as well, Ikaku as well. They all show up, Toshiro is there. They all show up to help Ichigo out at this moment. So they all fight against the individual members of Execution, while Ichigo takes on Ginjo in a big epic battle. Once again, this is just the abridged, and we're near the end now. So Ichigo now has his Shinigami powers back, so he goes into his new Bankai, which is like a little bit modified. It basically just has like an X pattern over his cloak that he goes into. His sword, Tensa Zangetsu, now has a bunch of like serrated edges. So that's what his new Bankai looks like when we go to the 1,000-Year Blood War Arc. This is the form he's going to be in. So it looks a little different from his original Bankai. So that's the reason why, because it's modified with his Fullbring, okay? So Ichigo fights against Ginjo. There's a really cool moment where Ginjo goes into his like Bankai, his second form or whatever. He looks really cool and edgy. He's got all these like skulls, everything on everywhere. His eyes turn red. And Ichigo, though, seems very clearly leaps and bounds stronger than Ginjo. At one point, Ginjo fires like a Sero or some kind of like energy attack. Ichigo literally just palms that thing and just crushes it, like not a big deal. And he finally cuts down Ginjo, which is a very important moment in the story. You should not overlook this. Ginjo was a human that Ichigo essentially just killed. Now, there was a reason why he had to do it, but he did just straight up kill a person, okay? Not a hollow, not a soul or anything. No, he killed a human being, all right? So Ginjo hits the ground. He wonders how it would be different if, like, what would have happened if Ichigo was the first substitute Shinigami and then I came after him? Would things have went the same way or things would have been different? And that's kind of the last thought Ginjo has before he dies. Tsukishima dies as well. He fought against Byakuya, so yeah, that didn't go well for Tsukishima. Although I have to say, Byakuya ran a bunch of Senbon Zakura's razors right through Ginjo's heart, like blasted a hole straight through him, and he was still able to live for like a good 10 minutes or so afterwards, so he has a pretty strong constitution. Must be the suspenders. So, ends up dying as well. There's a few other members of Execution. The only members that are still alive of Execution by the end of the arc, this is important, are Yukio Hans Vernaburner. He's German. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He can manipulate matter with his PSP, the pinnacle of all portable gaming consoles. After Yukio, we also have Jackie Tristan, who's still alive. However, it's stated that she actually lost her Fullbring ability during her battle with Renji. Okay, so she's still alive, but she can no longer use Fullbring, which is interesting because Yukio mentioned that she was actually the only one that truly hated her abilities from day one. All that stuff about all the Fullbringers wanting their abilities to be removed, that was all just a lie. That was a manipulation by Tsukishima, but Jackie genuinely hated her abilities. There was a Fullbringer named Giriko, who was killed by Kenpachi in one attack, so he's dead. And then there's Riruka Dokugami, and she has the Fullbring ability to seal anybody into an object that she loves or has an affinity for. She is still alive. She was attacked by Tsukishima at the very end. She sort of like shielded Ichigo from Tsukishima's attack because she sort of fell for Ichigo. Uehara and Tessai heal her up, but immediately after she's feeling better, she leaves the Uehara shop. And the last shot of the manga, it's a different thing in the anime, but a last shot of the manga in chapter 479 is Riruka standing on a building and then using her Fullbring to jump away into the distance. And she has an internal monologue talking about, like, never forget us, Ichigo, never forget the Fullbringers. And then she vanishes, okay? We also have a guy named Shishigawara, who was like Tsukishima's right-hand man. And so the last time we see him is he was carrying Tsukishima's body off, and Tsukishima was kind of like barely hanging on, and then he eventually dies. And then Shishigawara just walks away. So we don't know what's up with him. But yeah, other than that, yeah, Ginjo is dead, Tsukishima is dead, and Giriko is dead. But all the other Fullbringers are still alive, although Jackie still does not have her abilities, okay? So they're still around, okay? As for Ichigo, what happened with him is after Ginjo died, his body was recovered and brought back to the Soul Society, so Ichigo returns for the first time after, like, not being there for, over 17 months, not having his powers, returns to the Seirei, and he confronts the head captain, and we see all the captains there. We see some of the Vizards. We see that Rose, Shinji, and Kensei are now the new captains of the Gotei 13, replacing Gin and Aizen and Tozen. So Rose is now he used to be the captain of Squad 3. He resumed that position. Shinji is now the new captain of Squad 5 in Aizen's place, and Kensei is now, he resumes his role as the captain of Squad 9 after Tozen, okay? So since those Vizards are pardoned for their crimes, and after we find out what happened with Aizen and everything, so they're back to being Shinigami, we actually don't know what happened with the remaining Vizards. So Hachi, Lisa, Hiyori, Love, I think that's all of them. Hold on, yeah. And Mashiro as well. Yeah, we don't know what happened with them, but we can assume that they are also pardoned for their crimes, for the holification and everything. It was real that wasn't them. That was Aizen's whole plans and his schemes. But we just don't see them during this arc, but they're apparently doing okay. So Ichigo returns to the Soul Society. He wants to take Ginjo's body and return it to the world of the living for a proper burial. And there's a little bit of tension there, but eventually the head captain, Yamamoto, he relents. And that was like the last scene of the anime, where we see Ginjo's body being returned to the world of the living. And then Ichigo returns from the Soul Society, and he stands there on top of a telephone pole, kind of overlooking Karakura Town, the place that he lives and he grew up, and the place that he is now sworn to protect. And now he has his powers back, so he can actually properly do that. We look down and we see all of Ichigo's friends surrounding him, seeing him, welcoming him back to the world of the living. We see Orihime and Chad and Uryu there, Isshin and Uehara and Yoruichi in her cat form. We see his sisters, Karin and Yuzu. We see Mizuriro. We see Keigo. We see Tatsuki, all welcoming Ichigo back. And Ichigo just kind of smiles. Everything is now back to normal. All of his friends' memories have returned. And so he looks to the sky, and then that's the end of the episode. Okay, and I think Ichigo says, like, see you later sometime. And so that was the last episode of the Bleach anime back in 2012. All right, so that's where we left off. So that was the arc. Now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about each individual character and the groups, and to see what they're doing right now, okay? So first of all, Ichigo. So Ichigo now has his powers back, which also includes his Shinigami powers and his Hollow powers, because remember, he didn't have either of them when he lost them the first time, okay? So he probably has his Hollow powers back, but we know nothing more about that. Ichigo did not use his visored mask against Ginjo or anything. He didn't have a conversation with Zangetsu or with his inner Hollow while he was fighting Ginjo after he got his powers restored. So we actually don't know what the situation is with that right now. The last time we saw that, remember, Ichigo fought against like a version of Zangetsu fused with his inner Hollow in order to unlock the final Getsuga. So that was the last time Ichigo really interacted with them. And so then he lost his powers for 17 months, and now he has them back. So basically, what is Ichigo's current relationship status with Zangetsu and with his inner Hollow and the basis of his abilities? Could he still use his mask? You know, we haven't seen him use it yet, so we just don't know yet. But that's important to bring up. He has his Fullbring as well that's been added on top of his Shinigami powers. Okay, so it's like I said, it's basically like a strength increase. So his Shikai and Bankai are both a lot stronger than they ever were before. Ichigo's a lot faster, a lot stronger. He's got more stamina, more endurance, okay, now that his Fullbring has been fused. So yeah, that's Ichigo. And now he's also, I think, just mentally in a much better place now, because Ichigo was never... He was never a character that was like, yeah, I have these Shinigami powers and I'm going to be king of the Shinigami or anything like that. He's a very unique shonen protagonist in that way, where if you look at, like, you know, Naruto wants to be the Hokage, Asta wants to be the Wizard King, Luffy wants to be king of the pirates. They all have this very set goal. Ichigo doesn't really have a goal other than a very broad one of just wanting to protect his friends. And we saw when he had his power taken away from him how that affected him. Not directly, just the fact he lost the powers wasn't enough to make him really upset, but the fact that he could no longer protect his friends and there was like a distance growing between them, that was the thing that was really messing with Ichigo, and losing his Shinigami powers was the impetus for that. So now that he has his powers back, I think he's in a much better mental space right now, I should say. So moving on to Ichigo's friends, we have Orihime and Chad. Orihime still has her Shun Shun Rika. Chad has his Brazo Izquierdo del Gigante, and also the left arm of the devil as well. He has his two mighty arms, which are revealed to be Fullbring, and he trained a lot during the last arc, the Fullbring arc. It's just that we didn't really get to see him like max power in a full-on brawl, okay? But the implication is Chad and Orihime both got a lot stronger while Ichigo was powerless, okay? We actually did see a new ability with Orihime. She was actually able to use a new offensive ability combining Tsubaki and her three fairies with the defensive shield. So Ginjo actually attacked her at one point, which, you know, the shield blocked the attack, but then Tsubaki like counterattacked. So it's like a blast shield that she basically unlocked, okay? So Orihime has some new abilities. Chad probably does as well. We just didn't really explore them that much during the Fullbring arc, but they are a lot stronger than they were during the Soul Society arc, during Hueco Mundo. Would they be strong enough to deal with like a really strong opponent like an Espada or something? I guess it depends on the Espada. You know, like maybe if Orihime and Chad teamed up, they could take on like Zomari or something, maybe Arinyero. I don't know. Okay, Orihime and Chad, they could at least take on Arinyero. He's Arinyero. I mean, come on here. They could take on on some of the pre-Verona Espada, I guess, you know what I mean? They are a lot stronger than they used to be, but still not even close to being like the highest tier in the story. Let's see here. Now we have Uryu. Uryu actually got attacked very early on in the Fullbring Arc, as I said, so we didn't really explore that much with him. He shows up at the end and helps fight with Ichigo, but then gets attacked again by Ginjo and Tsukishima. The big difference with Uryu, really, is he has a new bow. He has, like, a short bow, and we actually got to see it during the trailer for the Thousand Year Blood War Arc. So he still has his energy bow, his Ginrei Kojaku, and, like, the energy Ryatsu bows he makes and stuff, but he also has this short bow, which I think is just a lot stronger, that he keeps on him at all times. Okay, so that's the biggest thing about Uryu right there. Let's see. Rukia is now the lieutenant of Squad 13 under Jushiro Ukitake. This is important because for a long time, Ukitake did not have a lieutenant ever since Kai and Shiba died. Rukia's former master, Sentaro and Kiyone were the like the third seats working as like one unit that were essentially the lieutenants of Squad 13. Rukia should have been the lieutenant a long time ago, honestly, but Byakuya decided to make sure that she couldn't, you know, pulled some strings because didn't want to put her in danger. But after the events of Soul Society and the fake Karakura Town arc, after Rukia has proven herself and she has her abilities back, she has her Zanpakuto, Sode no Shirayuki, which she's been training with constantly, Byakuya trusts her a lot more now, and so finally allowed her to become the lieutenant, the position she should have had a long time ago, replacing Kaien now. And so she's a lieutenant, and she's back, and she's awesome. Then we have Renji. Renji got a lot stronger as well. He, of course, has Zabimaru and his Bankai Hihio Zabimaru. He fought against Jackie, and I think actually his fight was one of the first times or only times that Aizen was mentioned during the Fullbring arc, because keep in mind, like, Aizen curb stomped every member of the Gotei 13, essentially. All the captains and lieutenants, they couldn't even touch Aizen during that fake Karakura Town arc, okay? He basically, you know, walked through all of them. And so a lot of the captains and vice captains have been training to fight against Aizen-level opponents. Now, that doesn't mean they've reached that point, because it's only been 17 months, keep in mind, and Shinigami age slower. So 17 months to a Shinigami is really nothing. They might change their hairstyle. That's pretty much it. You know, they might get some new clothing, whatever. Byakuya has a cool Captain Haori now. That's essentially it. But they have been training nonstop, and Renji is one of those Shinigami that has been, okay? So when Renji fought against Jackie, one of the Fullbringers, you know, Jackie had these really powerful abilities. Her dirty boots got really powerful with Ichigo's added, you know, Shinigami powers, and Renji essentially KOs her with one attack. He basically just takes his sword and, like, draws it and strikes Jackie right in the stomach, like right in the breadbasket with the hilt of his sword, Zabimaru. Doesn't even release it. Doesn't even go into his Shikai. Just BAM! And then knocks her out in a single attack. And Renji has this line, you know, I've been training for the last 17 months to fight people of Aizen's caliber. You know what I mean? I'm nothing against you. I'm sure you're pretty strong compared to regular riffraff, but I'm just above you at this point. You know what I mean? So Renji's definitely a lot stronger now. Let's see here. I mentioned Aizen already. He's still in prison. He's locked up. Uehara is, like I said, pardoned by the Soul Society, except we don't really even get to see much of Uehara during the Fullbringer arc. So we assume that, you know, he's on better terms with the Shinigami and the Soul Society and the Seirei and all that stuff. They ask him to do maybe odd jobs. It was actually because of Uehara working together with the Seirei that sword, the Ryatsu sword, was able to come into existence. Essentially how that worked is all of the Shinigami poured their Ryatsu into this blade, you know, so the captains and the lieutenants and Uehara and Isshin, everybody poured their powers into that in order to get Ichigo's abilities back in full. Okay, so Ichigo kind of has powers that are remnants of all the Shinigami captains. I don't know if every single captain. I don't know if Mayuri poured a little bit of his in there too. Probably a good thing he didn't. But a lot of them did. All of Ichigo's closest friends, you know, gave him a little bit of their powers in order to get his powers back, okay? So Uehara, though, he's still running the Uehara Shoten. He's still the humble owner of a tiny little small-town candy shop, essentially. Yoruichi, fun thing about her, she does not really show up at all during the Fullbringer arc, except in the anime. At the very end, she's seen in her cat form on top of Uehara's hat, and just kind of welcoming Ichigo back. So if we're going with the anime logic, then she's still in the world of living. Or Yoruichi, though, can kind of switch back and forth. She can kind of go to the Shinigami realm, that's Death Note, sorry, the Soul Society. She can kind of go to the Soul Society and back to the world of living very easily. She's a member of the Stealth Corps or whatever. So her being in the Seirei, living there as well, or staying in the world of living with Uehara, because they sort of have a thing going on. Either way, it makes sense there, but we just didn't get to see much of her. Isshin, the most important thing to bring up about Isshin Kurosaki, Ichigo's dad, is that at this point in the story, they have still not discussed, they have still not had that father and son conversation about the fact that Isshin is a Shinigami. Isshin shows up as a Shinigami at the end of Fate Karakura. He helps Ichigo out. He fights against Aizen very briefly, and then he takes Ichigo into the Dongai to show him how to use the final Getsuga Tensho, or like gives him the mechanism to learn it. But Ichigo and Isshin have never actually sat down and had the conversation of like, so you're a Shinigami, Dad. It's like never had that conversation yet, and it's been 17 months, so there's maybe a little bit of a gap maybe between them right now. Who knows? That hasn't been addressed yet, just so to speak, in case anybody was curious. Like, wait, wasn't Ichigo's dad a Shinigami? Yeah, he is. We still don't know anything about him as of the beginning of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. Don't know about like the division he was part of. He was clearly a captain because he had the Hiyori on him, but we don't know which squad he was part of. We don't know anything really about Isshin. Nothing really was explained during the Fullbringer arc yet. There's also Ryukin Ishida, who is the father of Uryu, and he's the head of the Karakura Hospital. He's friends with Isshin. He hasn't done much also, so in case you were curious about that, like, hey, what about Uryu's dad? He was like a really strong Quincy or whatever. Yeah, he is, except he has no interest in being a Quincy, so he's just kind of a doctor for a living. And there was an extra added scene with him in the anime where he kind of informs Orihime of the situation, like, be careful, there's somebody out there hunting, people with rare abilities, warning her about the Fullbringers and stuff. And he also even protects Ichigo at one point. But yeah, that doesn't happen in the manga. And there's no more information about Ryukin other than the fact he's Uryu's dad, he's Soken's son, and he also has really powerful Quincy abilities. He sort of inherited those Quincy powers from his father, Soken, but he doesn't use them very often, and he has no interest in being a Quincy. That's all we know about Ryukin so far. Yeah, that's, I think, all the major characters in their own right. Now let's go through the different groups. As for the captains, just to go through the captains, most of them haven't really changed much. Like I said, it's only been 17 months since the battle with Aizen. So Yamamoto, Soifone, Unohana, like I said, Byakuya got a new cloak, pretty much. That's it. Komamura got a new outfit. Shunsui's the same. Let's see, Toshiro got a scarf. Cool. Now, Toshiro probably most out of all of them because Toshiro is still learning and training with his Bankais, so 17 months for him training has probably done a lot more than the other captains did. Kenpachi is still the same old, same old. Mayuri definitely has a new makeup job. In the anime, he had the same makeup that he did during the Huecomundo arc, like the pharaoh kind of headdress sort of thing. However, we don't actually know what Mayuri's new outfit is yet, like what he looks like, because we did not see him in the manga during the during the Fullbringer arc. Although there was a scene at the end of the anime where Nemu, his lieutenant, returns to his lab, and she obtained Ginjo's old Shinigami pass. So she takes it out of her Shiakusho and hands it over to Mayuri, and Mayuri's like, ah, yes, the Shinigami pass of the traitor. So I actually don't know if that's going to be followed up at all in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, if they're actually going to follow up with that, if maybe Mayuri extracted any important data from the Shinigami pass. Because here's something else we find out during the Fullbring arc. We find out that these things are basically like trackers and wiretaps for substitute Shinigami. When Jushiro gave this over to Ichigo, it was basically a mechanism for him to like release his soul so he could go fight, but also it was like keeping track of where he was at all time. It was like a GPS and also a wiretap to hear what was going on in the Shinigami. The Shinigami could keep tabs on Ichigo. And so that was sort of the impetus for why Ginjo was so like evil, where he was like, Ichigo, we can team up. They're using you, they're manipulating you, they're listening to everything you're saying, and they never even explain this to you. And Ichigo's response to that is like, hey, listen, I trust Jushiro Ukitake. He's the one that gave it to me. I trust him. He's way smarter than me. So, but I think he's a good guy. So I'm going to trust him in that. And that was kind of the schism that happened between Ginjo and Ichigo, where Ginjo was just like, how could you trust them when you don't, so yeah, there was that. So Jushiro, though, he's the very sickly captain of Squad 13, but he is still the captain. He's still there. He's ill, so most of the time he really can't do much. But yeah, so other than that, though, all the other captains, like I said, Rose, Shinji, and Kensei have resumed their roles as the captains of Squad 3, 5, and 9, respectively. They are visors. Question if they could use use their Shinigami, they could use their hollow powers while they're Shinigami in the Seirete. I don't know if that's the situation, if Yamamoto, like, refused, like, you're not allowed to use your hollow powers while in the Seirete. Something like that, I don't know. We'll find out in the 1,000-Year Blood War Arc, I guess. As for the vice captains, we have Chojuro Sasakibe from the First Division. He did nothing during the Fullbringer arc, as would be expected. He really did nothing throughout the entire story. But his Zanpakuto is, his Shikai is Gonri Maru, turns his Zanpakuto into a rapier, and that's it. I always like Chojuro, but yeah. Then we have Marechio Omaida, who is the 2nd Division, or the leader of the patrol troops in the Stealth Corps under Soifone. He's the big fat guy. He's got Gegetsu Buri. His Zanpakuto turns into a big spiked chain, like flail sort of thing. Don't get to see him in the Fullbring arc at all. Then we have Izuru Kira, who is the 3rd Division lieutenant, now under Rojuro Otorobashi, used to be under Gin Ichimaru. This is something else interesting in the anime. At the very end of the anime, as the credits were rolling, we cut around the Seirete to see their reactions, like what they're up to. And so we see Izuru there getting drunk at a bar somewhere. And while Izuru is drunk, he's apparently, like, shit-talking Rose. He's apparently like, I hate him. He's not my captain. You know, it's like he doesn't like him very much, apparently, which is very interesting. Not something that was stated in the manga at all. So I'm wondering if it's expanded upon in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. If, like, Izuru and Rose's relationship is going to be kind of at odds, because that was something that was brought up there. Izuru, remember, his Zanpakuto is Wabisuke, the penitent one, so it turns into, like, that reverse guillotine that, like, doubles the weight of everything it cuts. Pretty powerful Zanpakuto. Then we have Isane Kotetsu, who's the lieutenant of Squad 4. Nothing else about her. Her Zanpakuto is Itegumo. It splits into 3 different blades. We don't really see her do anything with it, though. Then we have Momo Hinamori, lieutenant of Squad 5. She's now the lieutenant under Shinji. And once again, we saw her during the final credits of the anime. She seems to be doing a lot better. She met up with Toshiro, and she's talking. I did a whole video on all the lieutenants and all the captains if you want further explanation. But Momo she really got she mentally checked out through, like, a good half of the Bleach series, okay? After she was manipulated by Aizen and then stabbed by Aizen. I mean, she was in a bad way for a while. Now, hopefully, she's on the road to recovery. She's the lieutenant under Shinji, and so everything's doing good with her. Then we have Renji, of course, who's still the lieutenant under Byakuya. That hasn't changed. Iba is the lieutenant under Komamura. Don't know really much more about him. Nanao under Shunsui. Same thing as always. She's like a librarian. She's got the glasses and all that. Then we have Shuhei Hisagi, who is the vice captain underneath Kensei, who's become the new captain after Tozen, which is interesting because Shuhei actually looked up to Kensei when he was a little kid. Kensei saved him from a hollow attack when Shuhei was a little kid, and that inspired Shuhei to grow up and become a Shinigami. Also, Kensei has the 6-9 tattoo on his chest, and that also inspired Shuhei to get the 6-9 tattoo on his cheek. It doesn't mean what you think it does. There's a meaning behind it. Other than that, it's like 6 is like a kanji or like a symbol for their name, and then 9, 9th division, whatever. It was like, it made more sense on Kensei than it does on Shuhei, but whatever. So, yeah, that's Shuhei Hisagi. He's now working under Kensei. So kind of the parallel between Izuru and Rose, where Izuru doesn't like Rose very much. I don't know how Momo feels about, Shinji, but Shuhei, like, looks up to Kensei as, like, his role model. So I'm actually interested to see how their dynamic's going to be. Rangiku Matsumoto, her Zanpakuto is Hineko, and she's still under Toshiro Hitsugaya, same dynamic as always. Then we have Yachiru Kusajishi. We still do not know Yachiru's Zanpakuto. It's never really been addressed. She has one, we just never really saw what its Shikai is, and she's the lieutenant under Kenpachi. And then we have Nemu Kurotsuchi. We don't really know if she has a Zanpakuto either. She's seen to have one in certain, like, supplemental material, like posters and stuff, but other than that, she's never used it. She is an artificial soul, the combination between a mod soul and, like, a Gigai put together by Mayori Kurotsuchi, who's essentially her father. Mayori is the mad scientist, of course, who has Ashisogi Jizo as his Zanpakuto, and really looking forward to see what he's going to do in the final arc. And then finally, we have the lieutenant of Squad 13, who is, of course, Rukia Kuchiki. So just a little bit of a run-through between the captains and lieutenants there. And then I also wrote down the Espada here, because the Espada might be another group that a lot of people remember. Like, what about the Espada? Are they still around? So, kind of. Most of them are dead at this point. Stark is dead. Baragon is dead. Haribel is still alive. She was cut down by Aizen, but she didn't actually die. Then Ukiura is dead. He disappeared into ash. Noitura is dead. He was killed by Kenpachi. Grimmjow is still alive. Grimmjow did not die. He was defeated by Ichigo, but he's not dead. He was also kicked around a little bit by Noitura, but Grimmjow's still alive. Zomori is dead. He was killed by Byakuya. Silaporo Grants is dead, killed by Mayuri in one of the most grisliest ways possible. Arinyero Arureri is dead. They were killed by Rukia. And Yamirago is also dead. Espada Zero, killed by Kenpachi and by Byakuya. So we have Haribel and we have Grimmjow, essentially, as the only Espada that are still alive. The pre-Verona Espada, Dordoni and Cheruchi, being the guy that fought against Ichigo and Huecamundo, and then also Cheruchi Thanda, was the one that fought against Uryu when Uryu used the Seile Schneider. They're both dead. Also, probably the bodies that were in Silaporo's laboratory that were kind of hanging there. The silhouettes kind of looked like them. Then Gantenbai and Mosqueda, Pre-Verona Espada number 107, was defeated by Chad, but remember, Unohana actually healed both of them. So Gantenbai is still alive. Maybe we'll see him in the final arc. Let's see, and then Nell 2 as well. Nellio 2, Oda Schwank, the former Espada number 3, and then she was attacked by Sile and Noitura because they, didn't like her very much, and so her mask cracked and her Ryatsu leaked out, and she turned into a child, and she had amnesia. Her Fraction, Pesce, and Dondo Chaka, sort of a comedy relief duo for most of Huecamundo, were revealed to actually be pretty strong in their own right, and then eventually when Ichigo was getting the stuffing knocked out of him by Noitura, Nell reverted back to her original adult form and was able to fight against Noitura very briefly before reverting back into a child again. However, the last shot we had of Nell was she was a kid, and Noitura was just killed by Kenpachi, just sliced in half by Kenpachi, and Nell was kind of like, Noitura. So the implication is even though she's a kid again, she still has her memories. Her memories came back, so she still remembers. But we haven't seen her at all since then. Since that fight between Noitura and Kenpachi, haven't seen Nell at all. Assuming she got reunited with Pesce and Dondo Chaka, assumingly they stayed in Huecamundo, but that's it. That's all we get from Nell. Okay, and then, Haribel is still alive and Grimmjow is still kicking, so that's that. Finally, the last thing I wrote on here is just Ichigo's other friends. So, Tatsuki, Keigo, Mizuro, and then Yuzu and Karin, who are his sisters. Yeah, they're still around. They're still around. They know what Ichigo does now. They know Ichigo is a Shinigami. They don't really have powers of their own. They did the whole thing with the Karakura superheroes every once in a while, but that was pretty much it. Oh, there's Cone. There's Cone here. We actually haven't seen Cone in a very, very long time. We didn't see Cone at all during the Fullbring Arc, so he wasn't living with Ichigo anymore. There was actually a thing in the anime where Cone, I think, was obtained by the Research and Development Division, the R&D Division, Squad 12 of the Soul Society. So that's probably where Cone is at right now and probably being experimented upon because he just doesn't show up at all during the Fullbring Arc. So he's not probably living with Ichigo in the Karasaki Clinic anymore. He's probably not in the world of living. But yeah, that's where Kone's at right now. And then Ichigo's other friends, they're still high school students at this point when the 1,000-Year Blood War Arc starts. They're still in school, probably going to be graduating soon. I hope nothing comes up and happens. Okay, I'll just spoil it for you right now. The 1,000-Year Blood War Arc is Ichigo and his friends. They just graduate high school and they go to college, and it just becomes a slice of life manga for a while. So that's pretty much it. Anyway, though, that is that is just the recap I wanted to go through of Bleach. I hope I did a good job. Yeah, this video was mainly for the people of I kind of remember Bleach, but not really, because that sucks. That always sucks when there's a series that you read, but then you stop reading halfway through, or maybe you even finish the series, but it's been 5-10 years and you don't remember everything about it. Yeah, you can go on YouTube. There's, like I said, plenty of people that are, recapping the whole series, doing video series or an hour, 2-hour long video recapping the whole damn story. Or maybe there's a whole thing you can rewatch it with people with Mark's doing. It's great. It's awesome. But, maybe just one solid, I guess this video is kind of long now too. But it's less than an hour, so I'll go with that. So go check out Totally Not Mark's series. Go check out Volume 1 podcast. I'll leave links to those guys below. Pretty cool stuff, and I hope I could help you out if you were kind of sort of a fan of Bleach, but not really, and now you're getting back into it. There you go. All right. This will be Tekking101 signing out.